The cafe was nearly empty when he walked in. The sound of the door swinging shut felt like a whisper in the mist. And then David was there. Tall, confident, salt and pepper hair damp from the rain, dark eyes searching until they landed on her. Emma sank deeper into the booth, brushing hair from her tired, puffy eyes. She hadn't expected to see him tonight. Not him. Not after the mess that was her breakup with Jake. "Emma?" he said quietly, brushing raindrops from the lapel of his coat. "Are you okay?" The sound of her name felt like a crack in the armor she had tried to build. She shrugged, voice shaking. "Not really. Everything feels broken." David didn't press. He didn't scold or judge. He simply pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, resting strong, weathered hands on the table. "Jake called tonight," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. You deserve better than this mess." Emma drew a slow breath, brushing fresh tears from the corners of her eyes. "Maybe I don't deserve better. Maybe this is exactly what I deserve for being too hopeful, too naive." David shook his head, voice deep and certain. "That's not true, Emma. You have a heart that shines too bright for people who don't know how to protect it. That's not a flaw. That's a strength." The words sank deep. The quiet sincerity in them felt like a hand reaching across the room to guide her to safety. Suddenly, she was aware of every inch between them, the warmth of belonging brushing across the quiet space. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly, brushing hair from her forehead. "Why tonight?" David met her gaze, voice soft. "Because when the world turns its back, when pain finds its way into the quiet spaces of the night, sometimes the only thing we can do is find each other. And tonight, I didn't want you to be alone." Emma felt a fresh sting of tears, but this time, for a different reason. Not heartbreak, not betrayal. This felt like belonging. "David, this is wrong," she breathed, voice wavering. "Maybe," he said quietly, brushing a hand across hers. "But sometimes wrong feels like the only right thing left." The sound of the barista clearing a cup felt a million miles away. In that moment, in that quiet space between heartbreak and belonging, something sparked. A warmth rising from deep within, ignited by a man she was never supposed to notice, never supposed to want. Emma drew a breath as she met his gaze. "I don't know where this goes, or if it can be anything at all." David gave a faint, knowing smile as he tightened his hand over hers. "Then we find out together. No promises except one. I'll stand with you, no matter where this road leads." And in that moment, a quiet agreement passed between them. The night embraced them, and for the first time in days, in weeks, in months, Emma felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The breakup. Emma stood in the middle of the quiet campus courtyard, gripping the phone in her hand, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. The crisp autumn air swirled around her, rustling the amber leaves at her feet. The voice on the other end was sharp, cold Jake. "Emma, I don't think this is working anymore." His words weren't a whisper, but a knife. Her heart sank. "What do you mean?" "We can fix this, Jake." The sting of desperation bubbled within her voice. Jake sighed, sounding tired. "I'm tired of fighting, tired of trying to make this work. We're too different. You deserve better, and honestly, I need space." He hung up before she could respond. Emma sank down on the stone steps, choking back the sting of tears. They had been together for a year. A year of late-night walks, tangled embraces, and hopeful whispers about a future together. Now it was gone. The boy she thought she knew was gone. Seeking refuge, with nowhere else to go, Emma walked until the sting of the wind felt like penance. Eventually, she found herself in a quiet, cozy cafe tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The smell of roasted coffee wrapped around her like a warm blanket as she pushed the door open. The cafe was almost empty. A couple sat in the corner, and an older man with graying hair and sharp, kind eyes was perched by the window, a book resting in his hands. He looked up as she entered, offered a soft smile, and returned to reading. Emma sank into a leather chair near the counter and ordered a cappuccino. The warm cup felt like an anchor as she tried to piece herself back together. The stranger, moments later, the older man set down his book and glanced at her. "Are you all right?" His voice was deep and rich, like the sound of a crackling fireplace. Emma managed a faint smile. "Just one of those nights." He nodded, understanding. "I've had a few of those myself." He offered a hand. "I'm David, by the way." "Emma," she replied, brushing hair out of her eyes. Something about David felt instantly safe. The slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes spoke of wisdom, and the faint smile he offered was genuine. Before she knew it, the story of her heartbreak came pouring out. He listened patiently, quietly, offering only the occasional nod or word of understanding. An unexpected connection. Time passed quickly, and the cafe became a cocoon where Emma felt sheltered from the sting of the outside world. They spoke of life, books, and music. Somehow, it felt like she'd known him for years. As she stood to leave, David smiled. "If you ever want to talk again, you know where to find me." Emma felt herself blushing despite the sting of heartbreak. "Thank you. I needed this tonight." The revelation. The next morning, as Emma stood at the campus cafe, scrolling through her phone, she froze. An old photo of Jake and his father came across her feed. Suddenly, her heart sank. The man from the cafe. The warm voice, the understanding smile. David. Jake's father. The final scene of part 1. Emma sank into the nearest chair, staring at the photo. The world felt like it had tilted. Suddenly, she remembered the warmth in David's voice, the depth in his eyes. What felt like refuge now felt like a precipice. How had she found herself falling for the father of the boy who had just broken her heart? Shock and guilt. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, the photo of Jake and David still glowing on her phone screen. Her mind raced. How could I not realize? How could I have poured my heart out to him? The warmth she'd felt from David the night before now burned her with shame. Was it wrong? Was it betrayal? She thought about Jake's smile, the one she used to love, and then she thought of David's eyes, gentle, kind, and understanding in a way Jake had never been. Emma tossed and turned that night, unable to quiet her mind. Unexpected encounters. Days passed. Emma tried to avoid places where she might see David, but fate had other plans. At a charity art event on campus, one she'd promised her friend Sophie she'd attend, she spotted him across the room. David stood tall in a tailored blazer, looking both out of place and perfectly at ease among the student crowd. Their eyes met. David gave a polite nod, but there was hesitation, as if he wasn't sure how to greet her now. Emma's heart raced. She turned quickly, pretending to admire a painting. But moments later, she felt his presence beside her. "Emma." His voice was soft, careful. "Hi," she said, barely able to meet his eyes. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again." "I didn't expect to see you either." "I didn't know you were." She stopped, unsure what to say. David smiled faintly. "Jake invited me. I thought I'd support him." The mention of Jake's name hit her like a wave. But David seemed to notice, and his smile faltered. "Listen, about the other night at the cafe." "It's okay," Emma interrupted. "I didn't know." "You didn't know." It was just a coincidence. But deep down, she wasn't sure she believed her own words. Inner turmoil. That night, Emma replayed their brief conversation over and over. She felt drawn to David's steady presence, his quiet strength, but the guilt gnawed at her. Meanwhile, David sat alone in his study, nursing a glass of whiskey. He knew what he was feeling was dangerous. Emma was young, beautiful, and vulnerable, and she was his son's ex-girlfriend. But he couldn't deny the connection. Her honesty, her kindness, her spark, things he hadn't felt drawn to in years. Family ties. The tension thickened during a family brunch Jake invited Emma to in an attempt at being friends. David was there. The air felt heavy with unspoken words. Jake chatted away, oblivious to the glances exchanged between Emma and his father, glances filled with meaning, with questions, with things neither dared say aloud. Emma excused herself early, feeling as though she couldn't breathe under the weight of her own feelings. David watched her leave, fighting the urge to go after her. A quiet conversation. Later that evening, as rain began to fall, Emma found herself walking aimlessly and somehow ended up at the same cafe where they first met. And there he was, sitting at the window again. He saw her, hesitated, then waved her over. "Emma, are you all right?" She sat down slowly. "No, I don't think I am." David exhaled, leaning forward. "Me neither." The two sat in silence for a long while, the rain pattering softly against the window pane. Finally, David spoke. "I never intended for this to happen. Whatever this is." Emma nodded. "Me neither. But it feels like something we can't stop." Tension builds. The next few weeks were a blur of awkward family moments, stolen glances, and chance meetings that didn't feel like chance at all. Emma began to realize that David saw her, truly saw her, in a way Jake never did. And David felt alive in her presence, as if the weight of his failed marriage and lonely years had lifted, if only slightly. But both knew the risk. Both felt the guilt. And yet, neither could deny what was growing between them. The cliffhanger. One evening, after another of Jake's attempts to win Emma back fell flat, Emma found herself walking home in the dark. David's car pulled up beside her. "Let me give you a ride." "Please." She hesitated, then got in. The ride was quiet at first, filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, David pulled over near the park. "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this," he said, his voice low, almost pained. Emma turned to him, her heart pounding. "Neither can I," she whispered. Their faces were inches apart. The tension crackled between them, undeniable, terrifying, exhilarating. And just as David leaned in, headlights flashed behind them. Jake's car. The near miss. Jake's headlights blared as David and Emma froze. The sound of tires slowing, the engine idling. In that tense moment, every breath felt like a betrayal. Emma pulled away quickly, brushing hair from her flushed cheeks. David clenched the wheel. "Stay calm," he whispered, voice low. Jake pulled up beside them, rolled down the window. "Dad?" "Emma." He sounded wary. Emma smiled as naturally as she could muster. "Jake. We just bumped into each other after that dinner. He offered to drive me home." Jake narrowed his eyes, brushing hair from his own. "That's unexpected. Just making sure she got home safe," David said smoothly, locking gazes with his son. "It's late." Jake shrugged, brushing it off. "All right. Thanks, Dad." He waved and pulled away. Emma sank into the seat, heart beating wildly. That was too close. David gripped the wheel, voice tight. Too close. But despite the fear, despite the guilt, the charge between them remained palpable. A growing connection. Days passed, and the quiet tension between David and Emma grew into a slow burn. Coffee meetings became regular. Conversations deepened. They talked about books, films, life aspirations. The sting of the past felt replaced by the warmth of belonging. Emma felt herself falling, not for the status or the taboo of being with an older man, but for the understanding, the quiet strength, the depth in David's voice and eyes. David felt the same. After years of loneliness following a divorce that left him hollow, Emma brought light and color. The age difference felt irrelevant when weighed against the comfort and trust growing between them. The guilt. Each evening, when Emma returned to her tiny dorm room, guilt surged. Jake was no longer hers, and yet every laugh she shared with David felt like a betrayal. What would the world say? What would Jake say? What if she lost them both? And David felt torn between being a father and being a man rediscovering the warmth of affection. The questions haunted him late at night. Was he stealing a piece of happiness meant for someone younger? Was this a mistake he would regret? But every moment with Emma felt right, felt like belonging. Against all reason, it felt like the only thing making sense anymore. A quiet confession. One rainy evening, the tensions came to a head. Emma was perched on the edge of the cafe booth when David placed a hand over hers. "Emma," he said quietly, voice wavering, "I don't know where this goes, but I can't pretend anymore." Emma met his gaze, and for a moment, the world dissolved. "Me too," she confessed. "I tried telling myself this was wrong, but how can something that feels like this be wrong?" Their hands tightened. A quiet agreement passed between them. Against all odds, despite judgment and guilt, their bond felt worth exploring, worth defending. The secret kiss. As they stepped out of the cafe, the rain misted down. The city felt like a witness to their quiet rebellion. David pulled Emma closer, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Emma," he said softly, "you deserve happiness. Whatever this is, whatever we're starting, I will protect it." And then he kissed her. A kiss that felt like home. A kiss that promised belonging, belonging despite the chaos that would inevitably come. The world closes in, but the world doesn't rest. Jake spotted them from across the street, a silhouette in the mist. The shock, the anger, and the sting of betrayal crossed his features as he watched the scene play out. He clenched his fists, unable to comprehend the betrayal unraveling before him. Jake spun on his heel and walked away, breathing heavily, as if trying to piece together how the two people he trusted most had chosen each other. The sound of the downpour masked the sound of his heartbreaking. The cliffhanger. Emma pulled away from the kiss and smiled shyly. But across the misted street, somewhere in the falling rain, a witness had already decided that this secret would explode. The betrayal unveiled. Jake stood in the pouring rain long after the kiss he witnessed, fists clenched and heart burning. The sting felt like a knife twisting deep inside. The girl he once loved. The father he trusted. Together. He sank down onto a nearby bench, unable to comprehend the betrayal. Memories flooded, moments with Emma, moments with his father. The lines between the present and the past blurred, until only one thing felt certain: this was war. The fallout. The next morning, the house felt like a pressure cooker. Jake arrived early, brushing past David with a scowl. "I saw you with her. In the rain. Do you want to tell me what the hell that was?" David's voice was low, measured. "Jake, this isn't about you anymore. Emma and I." Jake slammed a hand down on the counter. "That's my ex. Do you have any idea how messed up this is?" David faltered, searching for words. "Jake, I never meant for this to happen. But it did. And I won't apologize for how I feel about her." Jake clenched his jaw. "Then you're no father of mine." He stormed out, leaving a silence so sharp it felt like a blade. The heartbreak. Emma felt the weight of the world crash down when she received a text from Jake. "We're done. Stay away from my family. Stay away from him. Stay away from me." She sank to the floor, shaking, unable to comprehend how quickly the warmth of belonging had twisted into isolation. That night, she called David, voice shaking. "Maybe this is too much. Maybe we're making a mistake." "Emma," he said quietly, voice breaking, "you're not a mistake. What we have is worth fighting for." But how could she possibly justify breaking a bond between father and son? How could she ask him to risk it? The fractured family. Days passed like years. Jake refused to speak to David, refused to acknowledge him. The house felt like a tomb of silence and resentment. Emma sank into herself, guilt carving lines into her heart. But every time she thought of letting go, every time she tried to walk away, she remembered David's hand brushing hers, the warmth in his voice, the belonging that felt too rare to abandon. An unexpected choice. Then came a quiet knock at her dorm room door one night. Jake stood there, soaked from the rain, heartbreak burning in his eyes. "Why him?" he asked hoarsely. "Why my father?" Emma sank down beside him in the hallway, voice shaking. "Jake, I didn't plan this. I didn't choose it. It found us. He found the pieces of me that felt broken, and he gave them a place to rest. This isn't about betrayal. It's about belonging, about finding home when you least expect it." Jake shook his head, voice breaking. "Then where does that leave us?" Emma drew a deep breath. "Maybe it leaves us with a chance to be honest, to accept that life doesn't always fit into the lines we draw for it. You deserve to find someone who chooses you, fully and completely. Just as I deserve to find someone who sees all of me. Just as your father deserves the chance to be happy too." Jake sank down, exhausted, wounded, but quiet. The silence felt like the crack in a storm, the sound of heartbreak making room for understanding. The final resolution. Days later, David stood in the garden when Jake emerged. The boy he'd watched grow into a man stood stiff, wary. Jake spoke first. "I don't like this. I don't understand it. But if she makes you happy, if this is real, then I won't stand in the way." David's voice shook. "Jake, you're my son. Nothing and no one can ever replace that." Jake offered a faint nod, brushing a hand across tired eyes. "I just don't want to lose you too." David pulled him into an embrace, strong and quiet, a reminder that love, even when complicated, can evolve, can deepen, can find its place. New beginnings. Emma stood at the edge of the garden as the sun sank, brushing gold across the horizon. David stepped beside her, brushing his hand over hers. "What now?" he asked quietly. Emma smiled, voice soft but sure. "We walk forward. Not because it's easy, or because it's simple, but because it's ours." And in that moment, surrounded by the threads of a tangled story, three hearts began to mend, making space for belonging, for understanding, for a future shaped by choice and grace, no matter how improbable the path.